Imagine a world where NATO, the strongest military alliance, suddenly collapses. Countries that once guaranteed each other protection are left exposed, trust shattered overnight. For over 70 years, NATO has been the backbone of global security, shaping borders, economies, and politics. But now, cracks are showing. Political rifts, economic strains, and shifting alliances threaten its unity. This video explores what would happen if NATO fell, the immediate chaos, the long-term consequences, and the new dangers that could emerge. The stability we take for granted is not permanent, it's a construct that can crumble. Let's journey into a world without NATO. At number 1 is military chaos. The end of NATO would send shockwaves through the global military landscape. Eastern European nations, once shielded, would face sudden vulnerability. The alliance's integrated command structure would dissolve, ending decades of seamless cooperation. Intelligence sharing, joint operations, and standardized equipment would vanish, replaced by confusion and fragmentation. Each nation would scramble to rebuild its own defenses, triggering a frantic arms race. Defense budgets would skyrocket, draining resources from social programs and economic growth. The focus would shift from collective security to national survival, breeding suspicion among former allies. Europe, once a symbol of peace, could become a powder keg, with border disputes and old rivalries reigniting. Without NATO's de-escalation mechanisms, even minor incidents could spiral into major conflicts. The US military presence in Europe would be questioned, and American bases might close, leaving a power vacuum. Military interoperability would collapse, making future coalitions slow and ineffective. Soldiers who once trained together would now face uncertainty and eroding morale. The loss of shared purpose and trust would weaken the resolve of those tasked with defending their nations. The continent would be left dangerously exposed, with no unifying force to keep the peace. The risk of war in Europe would rise dramatically. At number 2 is political instability. NATO's collapse would trigger panic in capitals worldwide, shattering decades of diplomatic precedent. Nations would scramble to form new alliances, but none would match NATO's scale or credibility. Europe could fracture into rival blocs, echoing the instability that preceded the world wars. Populist and nationalist movements would seize the moment, pushing for isolationism and protectionism. The European Union, deeply intertwined with NATO, would face internal divisions over security and defense. Debates over a unified European army could paralyze or even fracture the EU. The US would be seen as an unreliable partner, damaging its global leadership and credibility. Allies in Asia and elsewhere would question American security guarantees, further destabilizing the world order. International law and institutions would weaken, as authoritarian regimes celebrate the end of collective security. Trust in treaties and alliances would erode, making future agreements harder to achieve. The world would become more unpredictable, with nations prioritizing short-term interests over long-term stability. The collapse of NATO would send a message of even the strongest alliances can fail. The rules-based global system would be at risk. The political fallout would be felt for generations. At number 3 is economic shockwaves. Financial markets would react instantly to NATO's collapse, triggering global sell-offs and economic panic. European nations would be forced to massively increase defense spending, slashing budgets for healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Living standards would fall as austerity measures take hold. Trade and investment would suffer, with shipping insurance costs soaring and foreign investment fleeing unstable regions. The defense industry would boom, but at the cost of productive economic growth. Europe's economic unity would be tested, as rising tensions and protectionism threaten the single market. Energy security would deteriorate, with Russia exploiting divisions to wield its resources as a weapon. Nations would scramble for energy, driving up prices and competition. The economic dividend of collective security, worth trillions, would vanish. The cost of rebuilding national defenses and lost prosperity would set the global economy back decades. The world would face a new era of risk and instability. The peace that fueled prosperity would be gone. The economic shockwaves would be felt everywhere. At number 4 is empowering rival powers. NATO's collapse would be a windfall for rivals like Russia and China. Russia would seize the chance to pressure its neighbors, using political, economic, and military means. Former Soviet states would face renewed threats, forced to choose between submission or isolation. China would benefit from a divided West, advancing its interests in Asia and Europe with less resistance. Regional powers like Iran and Turkey could expand their influence unchecked. The world would shift toward a multipolar order, but without the stabilizing force of alliances. Nuclear risks would rise as European nations considered developing their own deterrence. The loss of NATO's nuclear sharing would create uncertainty and potential proliferation. Authoritarian regimes would claim victory, arguing that democracy is weak and unreliable. Democratic movements would be demoralized, while autocracies grow bolder. The ideological balance would tilt away from freedom and human rights. The global power structure would become more dangerous and unpredictable. At number 5 is global security and terrorism. NATO's collapse would cripple intelligence sharing and counterterrorism cooperation. Former allies would struggle to coordinate, making it easier for terrorist groups to operate undetected. Joint operations against threats like ISIS or piracy would end, replaced by slow, fragmented coalitions. Political and military chaos would create fertile ground for extremism, especially in vulnerable states. Weapons proliferation would increase, with advanced arms potentially falling into terrorist hands. Intelligence agencies would shift focus to spying on neighbors, leaving blind spots for transnational threats. Terrorist groups would exploit the West's division, using it as a powerful recruitment tool. The world would be less prepared to prevent attacks, just as the threat grows. The collapse of NATO would make everyone less safe. The fight against terrorism would become far more difficult. The collapse of NATO is not just a distant scenario, it's a warning. The peace and prosperity we enjoy could vanish, replaced by fragmentation and conflict. The value of NATO lies not just in military power, but in trust and shared commitment to peace. Letting it fail would mean repeating the mistakes of the past. The cost of maintaining alliances is high, but the cost of their collapse is far greater. If this video made you think, share it, like, and subscribe for more deep dives into global security. The future is unwritten. Understanding the stakes is the first step to a safer world.